It's time to go racing under the Tuscan sun once again, just like that movie from 2003, as the drivers of Porsche Club of America Sim Racing take on Mugello over the next few weeks. After an exciting race in the challenge class last night, it's time for the sport drivers to take on the penultimate round of the season. Welcome to round 6 of Series 11 for the sport class in PCA Sim Racing. My name is Joey Tebben. Alongside me in the booth is Ewan O'Leary, and behind the scenes is our producer Ramiro Agustin Cisneros. Ewan, we had one race at Mugello already last night, as I mentioned. It was a little bit of a precursor to the action tonight, but we upgrade to the Sports Series. Slightly more experienced drivers, and all taking on one of the newest tracks in the iRacing service.
Yeah, still a pretty new track, as you say, and it sort of doubles up with 1 week ago at Zandvoort, doesn't it, that this is a relatively difficult circuit to overtake on. Look at all the twists and turns. I think it's going to be a great circuit to drive around, thoroughly enjoyable, and lots of twists and turns, but the best thing about this circuit is that it flows really nicely. Not too many big stops. There's a big one down towards turn 1. No annoying chicanes, not many annoying curbs to get yourself stuck on. It's just nice, flowing, pure Italian racetrack, and I'm sure that even if there will be little in the way of overtaking opportunity, there'll be plenty of driving enjoyment for the drivers tonight.
You gotta make sure to study your Italian with all those corner names. We'll see how far we can get with that tonight. The championship, very, very close in this class. Derek Dirksen still holds on to a 1-point championship lead, but Kevin Jokel got immensely close last week with another win at Zandvoort. He's missed one round this season, so he's already used his drop week. Derek Dirksen has not missed a round this season, had a bad race at the Red Bull Ring in race 3, though. That has been his drop week so far. It is very, very competitive at the top of this table, and you can't even count out a driver like John Gibson, who's currently sitting in third, about 23 points or so behind the two leaders, but say they come together, say they have bad days, and Gibson wins himself a race, this championship could still be wide open as we go into the championship finale in a couple of weeks' time. This is the penultimate round, so everything is to play for. And that's about it in the driver's standings. Track action going on right now. Everybody probably still getting their bearings. There was plenty of time in the coming weeks or in the prior weeks to get your practice in. The calendar was known, but once the session opens, you do only have about 10 minutes or so to get your final practice in and get everything squared away before qualifying begins in a matter of moments.
Yeah, it makes it unusual, doesn't it, compared to other series around the world where there's plenty of time in practice. There's a very long session. I've seen it at up to 2 hours in terms of practice for drivers to slowly dribble their way onto the server and get themselves up to speed, ease themselves into the conditions very slowly. As you can see, it's a bit of a trial by fire here for these drivers, some of them ending up in the wall, in fact. That was Derek Dirksen, by the way, who is leading the practice session at the moment, firing himself into the wall, clearly not quite fully acclimatised to the circuit just yet.
Gotta test the limits a little bit if you're gonna go fast, and he is absolutely going fast, up to P1 in this practice session. John Gibson doing a good job, as I mentioned. I'm scrolling down the order to see where Mr. Jokel is, and I do not see him having set a lap time just yet. I believe he will be here this week, if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, I don't see him yet. It is possible that he doesn't show up, but I don't know.
He is here, as far as I can see. He is here, just not on the circuit, and he doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't seem to be showing any intention of setting one either. I'm not sure whether that's a good idea. Not sure why he's decided to go with that idea either. But it's a bit odd and a bit nervy as well when you're looking forward to a great championship fight, and I'm sure we're going to get one between these two in the final couple of rounds. It means that you get a bit nervous as a neutral who are looking forward to a fight. Jokel is here, though. Hopefully he can get out in qualifying and can compete with Derek Dirksen, who's clearly quick as being shown by this session at the moment.
And Ewan is correct. I did just see Kevin Jokel just sitting on pit lane, maybe getting his virtual seatbelt strapped tight, maybe cleaning off his visor. Who knows what he was up to, but last time out at Zandvoort, he was almost dominant. So fast, won the race. It was John Gibson in second and Derek Dirksen actually in third after a pretty phenomenal comeback race. But looks like the tides may turn the other way. We honestly don't know. It's going to be a complete mystery until qualifying comes around in a matter of seconds, and then we'll see how those two championship contenders really blend together. I'm glad we have these seconds in practice, though, because it gives us time to shine a light on some other drivers. Robert Neville is here this week, and Randy Lervold crosses the line to go P6. Jason Finch crosses the line to go P3. It's an excellent lap from a driver we've seen in a couple of leagues here on RaceSpotTV.
Yep, good to see so many out on the tracks today as well. Over 30 participating in the Porsche Club of America Sport class for round 6 of the championship, and it's good to see so deep into a season that we have these numbers. 7 rounds, of course, in these series each time around in all 4 of the series, if you see what I mean. The final round will be at Daytona for these guys in a couple of weeks' time, but still plenty of racing at Mugello to come before we get to that. And what a great end to the season we're going to have, I hope, between Dirksen and Jokel. You mentioned how close it was, but because of the fact that Jokel has actually missed a round at Road America, he wasn't there, that means that Dirksen can, in theory, seal the title here tonight. We'll wait and see if he can.
We hope that doesn't happen, because we want to see the championship go until the final round. No offense to either driver, but I think everybody wants to see that championship end in the final round, come down to racing, and I think there's a very high likelihood that that'll happen. The clock has ticked into qualifying time, though, and this will be closed qualifying. You won't see every driver on track simultaneously like you did in practice. Every driver gets the track to themselves and gets a full 10-minute window to complete their laps and go as fast as humanly possible. Ankerberg Sona was out on track almost instantly. He's wasting no time to try and get his first laps on the board.
Yeah, probably a good idea for these guys that they are able to go out there on their own, because it would be very, very busy without it. We just got a glimpse of that practice session there, didn't we, where it was very, very congested, and finding a bit of free track would be difficult around here. It would have been difficult 1 week ago at Zandvoort, for example, as well. So good that everybody gets to go out there on their own, and they have the free track to themselves, but also not a very long time. I mentioned that in practice. Same goes for qualifying in what otherwise is pretty ideal conditions.
Can you translate that to Fahrenheit for me, Ewan?
You've got to times it by 3.5-ish. That's probably 70, 80 Fahrenheit I'm going to go for. 24 Celsius. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Maybe a little bit higher. Maybe 80 Fahrenheit I'll go with.
I looked it up on my other screen while you were saying that's 75, so you were almost exactly right. Maybe
Okay.
we should trust your math more. Who knew?
Well, it's always difficult though with Fahrenheit, isn't it? Because you can't just times it by one number. You've got to times it by a different number depending on where you are in the Celsius scale.
Too many formulas. It's too much math for
exactly,
a commentator to do. I like numbers like this, like Scott Nell, number 1. That is 1 digit. Don't have to do any math to calculate that. And he's on the clock now, going for his first timed lap. His out lap is in the books, and now he's got time for 3 flying laps. That's how many opportunities you get in this qualifying session. And Scott Nell may be one of the first drivers to cross the line in about 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's the opening time for him in the number 1 car, so he will maybe set the benchmark, but every single driver in this server is now out on the circuit, by the way, so there was plenty of people not interested in practicing who are now interested in qualifying and setting that lap time, because we do suspect it to be important. I was encouraged by yesterday's race, actually, that we saw in the Porsche Club of America, that there was quite a bit of overtaking. I've got to say I fairly enjoyed the race that we saw to open out 4 Mugello events that we're going to have over the course of this week and the next. There was a decent amount of overtaking, but maybe I was only comparing that to Zandvoort, where there was very little, especially in the pro race that we covered, Joey, 1 week ago. This time last week, it was very difficult to overtake. I think we're going to see a little bit more at Mugello. Longer front straight, bigger stop in towards turn 1 should be encouraging.
Robert Neville navigating through the last couple of corners. Jeff Williams doing the same. It's so difficult around this track because every corner is actually pretty similar. There's high-speed corners all the way around. The only truly heavy braking zone is that turn 1, and even that is slightly banked, slightly uphill. You can carry a ton of speed through there. But James Martin through the final corner, a little bit of a clip of the curb and a little bit of understeer as he rounds the final corner. The driver who missed last week at Zandvoort could still be in championship contention, though, on the outside. He's going to set the first flying lap in qualifying, and it'll be a 1:48.7. That'll be the benchmark for James Martin. He'll be looking to improve on that with 2 more laps.
Yep. What is the actual benchmark, though? It looks like Kevin Jokel is the pace setter, 47.9 from him. And there it is at the top of your screen, fastest lap so far. Derek Dirksen responds, 48.2. 3/10 difference between the two protagonists at the start of this session.
And also, you'll notice you don't see James Martin's time on the side of the screen. That's because that lap actually didn't count. He got an off track, and that disallowed his qualifying lap time. So he's got to go around another time. Jeff Williams navigating through the final sector. The final sector, basically 3 corners. You've got a very high-speed chicane, and you've got a very round final corner, and it's so similar to the rest of the track, Ewan, that actually wasn't the final sector. That was the first sector. It just looks identical from the helicopter view.
Yeah, it's very similar. The first part of this racetrack, from turns 2 to turn 7, just a series of chicanes that looks very much like either turn 10 and 11 at Scarperia or Pelagio, or indeed the 2 Biondettis at 13 and 14. Then there's that long looping hairpin, which does look unique. But yeah, you're right, there's a lot of that section where there's sort of one corner after another where you would, I guess, call it a chicane, but it's not quite like a conventional modern chicane that you see in the world of motorsport. They're much more flowing. This circuit flows very nicely compared to a lot of the more modern layouts.
Jason Finch racing for SRT in this series. You see him elsewhere on RaceSpotTV on Tuesday nights usually. Very strong driver in a GT3 car. He's looking to get his first lap on the board after putting a P3 in practice. Scott Nell, though, remember, his first time was disallowed with an off-track. This is going to be the first lap that counts theoretically, but it's not tracking too well, Ewan. A little bit slower than he would have liked. Crosses the line with a 149, no, not a 149, a 150.4. 2.5 seconds off pole. He's got one more lap time around to try and get a little bit closer. Maybe break into that top 10, separated by a second to the leader.
Any improvement that you can get in a field like this is going to stand you in good stead, because it's a very big field. As I mentioned early on, over 30 drivers in the field here tonight, and any incremental improvement can see you up the positions. Karen Haman going to try and do that as well in the 29 car. I believe that's a first representative lap, really. I don't believe that the first one was being 5 seconds off the pace. But look at even the top 10 here. Steve Comance here, he's only 3 tenths ahead of 9th place. He's in 4th on the second row of the grid. It is very tight in that section of the order, and as I say, any improvement will put you in good stead and really shoot you up the order.
Every driver in this series represents their home Porsche Club of America. There's hundreds of them across the country, and Steve Komatz, for example, represents the Rocky Mountain region. So I wonder if maybe that helps him a little bit with Mugello. We've got some slopes, we've got some massive hills and some drops down. He's used to elevation change. Maybe that's helping him out here. That's why he's in the top 4 right now.
I'm not sure we can quite compare the Rocky Mountains to Mugello here, but in Italy. But we're not quite in the north part of Italy. It's more rolling hills, I would describe it as, over here. But you get the idea. It does provide elevation for a racetrack, which puts you in good stead generally. People's enjoyment of a racetrack generally goes up when you seeing the rises and falls that you seem to get around here, really built into the landscape, forged into the earth, and provides great challenge for drivers come from far and wide to be here. Derek Dirksen goes over the line right now and cannot improve, in fact, and so will stay second. It seems that the first lap times were the best for quite a few of these drivers.
And Derek Dirksen, by the way, representing the Upper Canada region, which actually isn't as Upper Canada as you'd think. You might think that would be in like Nunavut or in the Yukon or something very, very high up. It's actually from Ontario to Thunder Bay, basically. So most of Ontario, that's what the Upper Canada region is, and that's who Derek Dirksen's representing. So shout out to all of our Canadians. It's the Porsche Club of America, but that includes North America. It's not necessarily the Porsche Club of the United States of America, which is it's good for some extra drivers from some extra countries. David Krutzler crosses the line to potentially start his final timed lap, but he hasn't actually got a time on the board on that last time. That was disallowed, and he knows he's not making it to the end of this lap. He toes back, and he'll start no better than 14th.
Yeah, not a bad place to start. Very much in the first half, but that still would have rathered a few more positions, I suppose. Now, final few drivers going to come across the line. Gil Estupinian currently in 12th position, might well and will just about make it back in time to set a time here, which is good news to try and move up from this 6th row of the grid where Gil currently finds himself, and so that's not a bad place, a bad starting point. But as I mentioned, is there going to be much improvement from those still out there? I've not seen very many since the opening round of times.
Let's see, is there any time on the board for Gil Estupinian out of the final corner? It's just a straight line now. Mash that throttle down and make it to the line. Gil across the Formula 1 starting grid. It's going to be a 1:48.7. That's a decent lap. Is it good enough for the top 10? I don't think it quite is. You need a 1:48.6 to make it to the top 10. So Gil will stay exactly where he was placed. P12, but not the worst starting spot in the world. In the top half of the field, very much so. Greg Bluen across the line in the nick of time. Is he going to improve from P20? You can already tell with a 150.2, not quite. He'll be in the bottom half of the field, but he'll be looking to move forward. And this is a place where you definitely can move forward, Ewan, especially if there's trouble on lap 1. Staying out of trouble here might mean that those drivers at the back could move forward.
Yeah, there was a bit of trouble on lap 1 last night as well. Just over they came at the top of the hill at Arrabbiata 2, which is turn 9. There was a bit of trouble. 4 cars were taken into contact during that, and so getting through lap 1 will be important.
Now it's time for the grid, or as they say in Italy, the grid. Kevin Jokel and Derek Dirksen, your championship protagonists here in the sport class. They'll battle it out on the front row today. John Gibson, trying to play an outside role in the championship as well, might look to steal a win from his 2 rivals. Steve Comat's an excellent qualifying to start P4. Then Kenneth Eskridge and James Martin round out the top 6. P7 went to Jason Finch from the Magnolia region alongside Rex Jarawala racing from the Jersey Shore region. As we approach summer, Mike Saxton and Mark Foley round out the top 10, and then the Carolinas driver Robert Neville starts alongside Gil Estupinan to round out the top dozen. Ankerberg, Sona, and David Krutzler are row number 7 ahead of Chad Casion and Charlie Fearer. Charlie had a pretty strong race at Zandvoort, if I remember correctly. Mark Lacombe and Curtis Krumel round out the top 18. But the hits keep on coming. It's a very big field. Randy Lervold and Greg Bluen to the end of the top 20. Jeremy Hall, Andrew Long, Patrick Gill, Christopher Costas round out the top 24. Christopher Costas, a very big mover at Zandvoort, so look for him to move his way forward. Carl Bacheri, a little bit lower in the field than he would have liked as he starts alongside Jeffrey Gardner and ahead of Jeff Williams, who's alongside James Lygo. Scott Nell and Joseph Evers round out the top 30. And the last drivers, Andrew Elsom, Antonio Da Silva, Peter Yerksa, Adam Holland, and Kevin Hamann round out a 35-car field here at Mugello today. That's a big field of Porsches, Ewan, and when you see those guys flowing down that hill, I'm already starting to worry for turn 1. Or I'm not starting to worry, I'm starting to get excited actually, because there's going to be a lot of drivers fanning out 3 wide, 4 wide on that wide front straight, looking to pounce on lap 1.
Yeah, even on the opening lap, turn 1's a good overtaking opportunity when you're getting up to speed. The braking zone slopes downhill slightly, it just elongates it a bit, and so there's going to be a lot of action down there. Hopefully everybody gets through cleanly, but there'll be plenty of opportunity to overtake as well, and those in the midfield will be looking to seize that.
It's a short pace lap. You don't have to go all the way around, so only a few corners to warm up the tires and get everything situated before we take on 40 minutes of racing here at Mugello. Temperature hasn't changed much. It's gone up a single degree Celsius, which I think based on what Ewan said is about 3 degrees Fahrenheit or so not too much to worry about for the drivers there. It's going to be cool conditions under the Tuscan sun, a little bit of cloud cover, a beautiful day here in Tuscany for some racing. But that iconic front straight suddenly in view, and the iconic Porsche pace car will pull off onto pit road and leave the field in control of our 2 championship protagonists, Kevin Jokel and Derek Dirksen. It's a very long front straight, though. You have to wait a little while before the restart zone comes, but Jokel is patient, and he's going to try and catch the entire field napping. He's waiting. He's continuing to wait. The green flag finally out, and Kevin Jokel leads the field to green, but it's a very wide front straight. Look at everybody fanning out 2 and 3 wide. Who's going to be the first to try and send it to the inside? For the first 5 rows or so, everybody's very well behaved, but under braking into turn 1 for the first time. Kevin Jokel looking to make it around the outside to turn 1. They're 3 wide a little bit further back. Dirksen looking to keep the nose to the inside of Jokel. That's not going to happen. And Kevin Jokel hangs on to the lead through the first corners.
Just about. Sent it very deep into turn 2 there and just about made it in again for turn 3 on a very narrow line. Dirksen hangs on to second place ahead of John Gibson. Steve Comat's in 4th place. Then Kenneth Eskridge. The first positional changes and battles going on between Rex Jarawala and James Martin. It looks like Jarawala has got off the road because it's dropping through the field very quickly indeed.
That was an excellent qualifying for Jarawala, but falling down the order, he's going to be looking to recover for the rest of the day. It was pretty well behaved through turns 1 and 2, though. Jokel and Dirksen were side by side, no contact made, and that's not what John Gibson wanted to see. He needed a little bit of drama. He needs these 2 guys to have bad days if he wants to keep fighting in this championship battle. And it looks like that is not going to happen, maybe until a little bit later today. We ride on board with Derek Dirksen now as he looks forward at the back of that purple Porsche of Kevin Jokel. It's tough to pass, though, through the middle sector. He's going to be thinking already, what can I do to set up this pass over the next couple of laps? And how can I steal this lead back? Because every point matters.
Does 4 points on the line here between the difference between first and second. And on many occasions this season, they have finished in first and second between the two of them. They were 1-2 in the opening 2 rounds of this championship. And so that's worth bearing in mind. These two are used to being in this position. And Dirksen putting the pressure on here. He's the championship leader. 3 wins already this season. Looking for another one into turn 1.
The power of the draft, very, very effective when a straight is as long as this. And Dirksen, much later on the brakes into turn 1. Is he going to be able to make it stick, though? It's not quite as banked around the outside as some of the corners at Zandvoort, but he's stuck on the inside. And into turn 2, Derek Dirksen takes the lead back. If he can get it down to the apex, he has solidified that move. And Derek Dirksen takes the lead. A little bit of smoke further back, though, as there's been even more trouble into turn 1. I think Jason Finch, unfortunately, involved this time.
Yep, he was, and it goes back to the pit lane, toes back to the pit lane as a result. But what an important pass that could be for Derek Dirksen here today. Seems that his race pace and maybe his consistency over the course of 40 minutes will be a bit stronger than Kevin Jokel, who is clearly strong in qualifying, too strong for the rest of the field by quite some distance. He's already being shown up early on here by Dirksen in the race.
Look who's hunting back there. Mr. John Gibson on the scene to potentially be a spoiler in the battle for the top 3 as they fall down the hill through turn 6, through turn 7. It is such a rhythm track, Ewan. If you miss one corner, you're basically paying for it for about 4 or 5 corners in succession. And I think Jokel might be getting a little bit out of the rhythm here through the middle sector, coming out of turn 9 rather, in the exit of Arrabbiata. Suddenly you can get a little bit of a rhythm, but then suddenly in turn 14, turn 13, turn 15, you've got to get back in the rhythm, and it doesn't look like Jokel's been able to do that.
Not particularly, and it's got to happen quickly here. Not a long race, of course. There is a pit stop involved, but it doesn't really matter. If Dirksen gets away well and pulls a margin, then Jokel might not be able to get back on terms again and get back into the lead. He very much needs to as well as we go over the line to complete another lap, and he's got to absolutely make sure that John Gibson doesn't begin to apply that pressure too.
Yeah, that was an attempted ascend. That was John Gibson making himself very much known in the rearview mirror of Kevin Jokel. Nothing quite doing there as that battle rages on. An update on some of those drivers who ran into trouble on lap 1. Jason Finch was obviously the big one. He's towed back to pit lane. Jeff Williams ran into a little bit of trouble. He's all the way to the back of the field. Other than that, it's been mostly clean. Rex Jarawala back to 21st, but not all the way back to last. He was able to recover on lap 1. But we're already 5 minutes into this race. It's flown by a little bit. Still a long way to go, though, and lots more can develop. There is a pit stop in this series. It's not required by the rules. It is required by the laws of physics. The fuel tank is limited, and you're not going to be able to go 40 minutes on one tank of fuel through here. So if you're a driver like Steve Komatz or potentially the 6 or 7 drivers behind him in a train, I think the strategy thoughts and the strategy talks are already going to begin.
Yeah, it's similar to Zandvoort in that way, isn't it? So that is already going to factor into the mind of a lot of these drivers. And it's not just about these guys who are up inside the top 10. You've got to remember about those all the way down the field. I mean, the train even extends arguably back down to 31st position. I know there's some breaks and gaps in the field, but realistically, Adam Holland is in a position of traffic just as much of the likes of those inside the top 10. Maybe Mike Sachs, who's just in the middle of a train right now, for example. It's very much a difficult situation for those at the front and the back. So you've got to remember that when pitting in, but it's especially difficult, I think, for those at the front because the chances of you landing yourself in traffic are quite high.
You did just see the Race Spot Christmas tree on the left side of your screen. Many, many movers throughout the field. Gil Estupinan at the back of this train is up a couple of spots from where he started. Steve Komatz, not quite so lucky, though. And he's in a pretty difficult position here, Ewan, because he is under pressure from both sides. He's trying to get by John Gibson, struggling to do that, maybe getting a little bit of dirty air through the high-speed corners. And he's also got Kenneth Eskridge behind him, a driver who we know is very capable of an overtake, very capable of being aggressive. You don't want to be in a sandwich with those 2 slices of bread.
No, And it's a surprise to me, actually, that John Gibson has begun to fall into the clutches of these guys further behind, because he was challenging those two in the lead pretty well earlier, but that seeming like a distant memory at the moment. This is unfortunate for Randy Lervold, who gets on one of those sausage curbs and goes for a spin around.
Luckily for him, though, he found the Marshall post, he found the iRacing tow truck, and he managed to get it turned around, though. That's unfortunate for him, though. Those sausage curbs, they appear many places in the world on these Grade 1 tracks that seem to think that those are the best options to slow down Formula cars and prevent track limits. They don't quite send you to space as much as they do in an open-wheel car. They don't break your spine as much either, but the second you hit one of those at Mugello, at Imola, at the Red Bull Ring, you can basically kiss your chances of making the corner goodbye.
Yeah, there's been a couple of those tracks this season, hasn't there? There is this one, of course. We did have the Red Bull Ring a few weeks ago as well, so worth bearing in mind, worth staying off them, even in GT cars, which traditionally can sustain that level of pounding on the curbs. You don't really want to if you can avoid it. Now down in towards turn 1, Steve Comance is the one defending here as Eskridge gets close. His car's so great for lunges on the brakes, but that's not one of them from Kevin Eskridge, who will wait for another day.
There's sausage curbs on the inside of this chicane as well. If you get the slightest bit too far to the inside on either apex through turn 2 or through turn 3, it just sends you in the air. Even a Porsche with a weight, I believe, around a ton or so. I should probably study my numbers on that to get the number exactly right, but still, the elevation into the air is quite extreme. I normally like Italian sausage, Ewan, but I can't say I'm a fan of those curbs.
Very good. How long were you thinking about that one? That's good.
A couple of seconds. Couple of seconds of build up there is totally worth it. I haven't done my other Mugello joke yet, though. That one's still stewing. That one will come soon.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that because the food analogy, or not analogies, but references that Joey was making even before the broadcast were quite.
You got to do it in Italy. It's all about food.
Well, I know, yeah, but I'm just not very knowledgeable about food for obvious reasons. Well, maybe not obvious reasons, but you'd see it was obvious if you looked at me.
Exactly.
In real life.
We'll go to Italy next year, Ewan. We'll take a trip together. We'll go to Tuscany.
I'll be changed. Anyway, this is the real battle in the group, isn't it? Or battle in the field, just inside the top 10. Not for the lead by any means. Derek Dirksen doing a very good job there, but everybody working out, how do I pass at Mugello? It's not quite as complicated of an equation as it was at Zandvoort, but it's by no means easy either.
Greg Bluen, mentioned him in qualifying, driver who ended up a little bit lower in the order than he would have liked, starting P20, but he is definitely on the drive forward. Only 3 spots up from where he started, up to 17th, but the journey has only just begun. Still 30 minutes left of racing for him to keep looking forward. Things are developing, though, up in the top 7, up in the top 8, as Mark Foley has not had the best run through turn 1. Gilles Stupainen looking to pounce behind him, unfortunately ends up in this section of the track that's very much one groove, and Mark Foley gets the rhythm back, is able to hold on. You can't get away with too many of those mistakes, though. You make one of them, you can get away with it. You make another one in immediate succession, suddenly the door's open for a driver like Gilles Stupainen to get by.
Yeah, this track does become a bit of a waiting game for that front straight and that first turn, doesn't it, really? It's a very twisty and delightful circuit to drive on, I've got to say, but very difficult to overtake in areas that are not the first corner. But that doesn't render it all unimportant. You've got to have a great run through the first sector, or the rest of the first sector, middle and final ones especially, if you want to be close enough to be even considered for a move. And at the moment, Steve Komatsu has not been able to do that. Right now, it's a difficult and different task at the hands of Kevin Jokel here, as that gap ever increases to Derek Dirksen.
Yeah, right now all of the Upper Canada region is cheering on Derek Dirksen right now, because he is just in total domination mode right now. And he looks a little bit more like he did at Spa, VIR, and Road America, where he won all 3 of those races. At Zandvoort, he looked a little bit more human, started deeper in the order than he was used to, made some overtakes, had some luck, and took advantage of some drivers in front having trouble, and was able to finish 3rd to keep his championship lead. But this has been back to the old Derek Dirksen, total domination. Steve Komatz is actually in a slightly more comfortable position now. He's lost John Gibson, which isn't great for him, but he's also lost Kenneth Eskridge a little bit. He's not under attack into the braking zone. Mark Foley, though, almost under attack into the braking zone as Gil Estupinan takes another peek to the outside. Can't get it done, though, and you can see a train in the background. David Krutzler about 2 seconds back. He's got about 7 other drivers who want to join this train as well, Ewan.
Yeah, it's becoming one of those situations where the drivers who are defending from certain counterparts are getting quite comfortable with where they've got their rivals at the moment, and this does happen if you see a long sustained group for a extended period of time. You get the driver in front sort of comfortable with having that driver right behind them. They know where to defend, they know the strengths and weaknesses of the driver behind, and so they barely have to look in their mirror anymore. That will increase the standard of their driving, makes it more difficult to overtake, and the cycle sort of continues from there. So you've got to hit early in these groups that you're in, and right now we're not in that early stage in the race anymore. Nearly a third of the way through already, and drivers are beginning to get comfortable with those who are around them.
Gil Estupinan, a member representing the Orange Coast region of the Porsche Club of America. That's around Orange County, California. And just to give you an idea of how big the Porsche Club of America is, even these individual chapters have incredibly large groups of people behind them. If you had to guess how many people were in the Orange Coast region of the Porsche Club of America, Ewan, how many would you say?
Well, I don't know what Orange Coast even means, but I'm going to go for, bearing in mind that I don't know that, I'm going to go for 2,000.
You're actually very accurate. 2,600 members in the Orange Coast region of the Porsche Club of America, and that's just one of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of regions here. I don't think every driver in this field is from a different region, but there are so many different regions represented in this field. There's a lot of Porsche owners in the US, Ewan, and they all want to get involved in this sim racing stuff we love so much.
Yeah, and the notable thing for me when looking through the results of where we do show, of course, which region each driver is from, is that they don't often correlate very well to a region that I associate in my head with America.
They've got funny old names.
Yeah, exactly. They're not listed by state, which makes it very difficult for me to know where on earth they're going.
Yeah, a driver like John Gibson, for example, in third. He's from the Rally Sport region, which is not a region of America. That's actually the region around Ann Arbor, Michigan, which I'm sure has lots of car enthusiasts as well, in proximity to Detroit, and he's representing them very well. Antonio Da Silva in kind of a green car pack here. We've managed to stick 3 of them together. He's representing the metropolitan New York region, so that's an accomplishment of his own. The fact that he's got an apartment or a house of big enough size in the metropolitan New York region to fit a sim rig in. That's a tough thing to do.
Yes, and helpful that he's in a region where I actually understand where he is in the world. That's good. So I'm enjoying that.
You've heard of New York. You haven't heard of RaceSpotTV.
No, I don't know what you just said. No,
that's actually my home region. The RaceSpotTV region is back in Philadelphia. That's what Chad Cassian is representing tonight.
There you go. See, I don't know what was wrong with the States, but I understand it's not meant to be the States. Just
Philadelphia region doesn't sound cool enough. They got to go for RaceSpotTV.
Exactly. It sounds better that way. It just confuses me. But I'm not American, so it would do. Meanwhile, Steve Komatz is having a few problems here, keeping with John Gibson. He's now let a second go, and actually thought a couple of moments ago that Kenneth Eskridge would be giving him a go in towards turn 1, but that's not happened on this occasion. Komatz stays 4th.
And that RaceSpotTV driver, by the way, his name is pronounced Chad Cassian. I think I said Cassian, but Cassian. That's how you say that name. So remember that for the future. I'm telling that to myself. The train continues here. Kenneth Eskridge, he's getting a little bit frustrated, I think, because he was kind of the leader of the charge. He was potentially the driver who would break up the Steve Komatz train, start looking forward, and forge his own trail. But it's actually been a little bit of the opposite. He's caught back up to 4th place, but he's very much in the clutches of Mark Foley, James Martin, Gil Estupinan, and David Krutzler, who continues on that train. I think it's been somewhat remarkable, Ewan, that this train has continued for as long as it has, because that means there's been minimal mistakes from any of these drivers, but you do have to wonder, eventually, that can't continue to go on for that long. These drivers are not AI, they are bound to mistakes, and eventually, something's got to break up this train.
Yeah, you'd imagine, and to be honest with you, I would have thought it would have happened by now, but clearly Driving has been strong in this group. Little mistakes, little openings. These guys to actually try and make a move on each other, and despite lots of early action in the field, it really has settled down now in the last 10 minutes or so as we approach halfway in this race. We'll wait and see whether Kenneth Eskridge can hold on from James Martin here, because he did go quite wide into the final corner at Puccine there, so he might be under pressure in towards turn number 1. There is Martin right behind, not even taking the full effect of the slipstream. Just look at the way he's ducking out to the left-hand side there, but it's side by side further behind for 7th instead.
Here we go. Gil Estupinan trying to make it happen around the outside. Isn't quite far enough along to make it happen, though. And Foley sends it to the apex in turn 1, shuts the door, and that continues the ride of the train once more. A little bit of a bad run into turn 2, though, for James Martin. Gets the rhythm back on exit. He starts to lose touch a little bit to Kenneth Eskridge, though. It's just these little bobbles they have to continue watching. Start to look for a little bit of fear and a little bit of pain to open the door. But speaking of opening the door, the pit strategy has begun. Joseph Evers has decided to be the lone wolf, and he's going to come down pit lane all on his lonesome and try and find some clean air.
One of the only drivers actually to come in before the halfway mark. We've already seen a couple start from the pit lane. We've already seen Jason Finch out of the race, so he's technically in pit lane, I suppose, but even so, it's been very few so far, as Gil Estupinan, I'm afraid, is off the road.
And that was through, that was coming down the hill, I believe. Mark Foley was in front of him, and it looks like this may have happened a little bit earlier. At least it may have started a little bit earlier. He's already off the road, and that just looks a little bit awkward, and I almost wonder if that's slightly technical for him.
Yeah, I think so, because just as we joined the onboard there, you see he was really wiggling the wheel for some reason. I don't know why, but I think that may have had something to do with it, because he was really testing something out for whatever reason. And when we joined him as well, his wheel was at an odd angle in the grass, so that could have been due to a spin, but evidently it wasn't, because we just watched him go off the road. And so, yeah, technical problem, I think, for him there.
Unfortunately, just like in real life racing, you can have a mechanical issue, you can break a part, you can blow an engine. In sim racing, unfortunately, you can do the same thing, where your wheel stops working, or your computer shuts off, or you lose power to your house. Just a little bit of extra realism, I guess you can say. Kenneth Eskridge, though, potentially feeling the pressure and potentially feeling the wear of the tires, as he slightly drifted it coming out of turn 1, very much drifted it coming out of turn 3 there.
Yeah, it's a show of where we are in the race now. Not particularly high temperatures, of course, but that does not mean that these guys aren't going to be struggling at this stage. Halfway through, the fatigue will start to get into it, and certainly for the drivers, for the tyres as well, got to be wary of that as they begin to get more tired throughout this race, and the concentration is more required than ever at this stage now, but still little opportunity for overtaking. Eskridge still hanging on to 5th place.
Talking about regions, Kenneth Eskridge, the only driver in the field from the Heart O-Dixie region, which is 15 counties in northern Alabama. So he's representing Bama here, as I'm sure a few other people are. March Madness going on. I don't have them going very far, but I'm sure he does. Mike Sackstein, not a member from the Heart of Dixie region, but a very beautiful livery, I must say. In a field where there's a few green cars, a few black cars, a few white cars, that one's not too difficult to pick out. Highlighter teal, highlighter orange. I know exactly whose car that is the second I see it.
Exactly, and that is a good thing. What I really enjoyed, though, is David Crux's livery. I don't know why, but something about that livery that I really enjoy, actually. It almost looks like the French flag, doesn't it, almost? If you look at it from the side, not from that angle, from the side, there you go.
There it is.
I'm not sure whether that's the effect he's going for, but I just really like that, and the way the colours are nicely faded into each other.
I think what he did is he went to the R in his RGB settings, and he turned the R all the way up, and then he turned the B all the way up, and then he said, you know what, I'm good. I think that's what I want. The brightest red possible and the brightest blue possible.
Got some green over the window banner, so he didn't need any of that. Decided to go for the white instead, which I personally think is probably a better idea.
Yeah, we know you are French, Ewan. We can tell by your accent.
Thanks. I can speak a bit of French, but by no means any good.
We're going to break that out one day. We didn't go to any French tracks this season. I guess Spa, partially French. Part of the country speaks French. But
what do you mean partially French? They do speak French.
Well, they also speak Flemish and Dutch and German.
Yeah, but not there.
Is that in the French part of Belgium?
Spa is in the French part of Belgium, yes.
How about that? We're learning geography today. Yes. That's why you come to the PCA Sim Racing broadcast. We learn about geography. We learn about food.
Yep.
What are we going to learn about next?
Very educational broadcast.
Exactly. Who knows what we'll learn about next? Science. Who knows? It'll be a lot of fun. We go to the season finale in a couple of weeks' time. We still do have 2 more races after this at Mugello. We'll have the upper 2 classes after this one as we ride on board with Mike Sackstein. 2 very different lines through the final corner there, Ewan. Krutzler in front, a little bit later of an apex, I think, and Sackstein very, very wide, trying to find that apex as well. It's almost like an oval through turn 15. It's so wide, and it's 180 degrees in total. There's multiple ways to find the apex.
There is, yeah, and somewhat banked the right way as well, although part of that is down to the fact that it is a plunge downhill through there. You can take a later apex and get a better run onto the front straight as well, but the fact that the final part of that turn is just a little bit more curved, it's not quite a real straight exit, a very defined and straight hairpin. It sort of eases out in a curve, if you like, on the exit of that corner, and so that does mean that it's slightly unorthodox, and you can't quite get the benefit of a late apex as you normally would, but it still spits itself out onto the best overtaking opportunity on the track.
And that season finale in a couple of weeks' time for all 4 series, it will be back in America, and it'll be the Daytona Road Course. That's a very different track from Mugello, a place where it's definitely easier to pass, a place where there's a lot more reward for straight line speed. And I think that's going to be a very exciting way to end this season, Ewan, because if we have our 2 championship contenders together on the front row yet again, I don't think you're going to see a breakaway like today. You're going to see those 2 sharing the draft and being in tandem for the entirety of those 40 minutes.
Yes, but it's worth remembering that if things stay as they are, then Dirksen would only need to finish second or better to win the championship, no matter where Jokel finishes. So, in a situation like this, if the 2 of them are head and shoulders above the rest of the field, then where does Jokel look to try and win the title? It's going to be very difficult for him to do so if they are in a similar situation such as this, especially because Dirksen has only finished off the podium once this season. That came at the abnormal circuit of the Red Bull Ring. I say abnormal because anomalies can happen around there, and they did for Dirksen.
And there's no bonus points in this series for pole position, for fastest lap, for leading laps. It's all about finishing position. But yeah, 4 points separate first and second, 3 points separate second and third, and then from there it's 1 point down all the way to the end of the top 20. There's going to be a lot of math next week, so I hope me and Ewan and the rest of the commentators of this series have our calculators ready, and I hope you do at home as well, because that's going to be a lot of fun to crown a champion in a couple of weeks' time. But we're not done at Mugello yet, because we haven't even thought about pit stops for the majority of the field. We've got a couple takers on this lap. Greg Bluen, Patrick Gill, Peter Yerksa, and Andrew Elsom have brought it down pit lane, but they're still very much in the minority. Over 20 drivers still yet to bring that car down pit lane.
Yep, so many still yet to come in, and I think at the front of the field that is mostly down to the fact that they would just come out in even worse traffic if they were to come into the pit lane. It's all well and good for those at the back to step in and try and do something a little bit different, but it's not a luxury that the top 10 can be afforded. It's not really a worry at all for the 2 leaders. They'll be staying out for quite a while, I would imagine, with the free air they've got, maybe until Dirksen starts to get into real thick lap traffic, who decide to come into pit lane. But what do these guys do? Where do they come out? And is it worth pitting in early at the risk of being in traffic?
Let's see, are there any takers this time around? It's starting to get into pit time for some more drivers. Kenneth Eskridge says, I'm staying out. James Martin says the same thing, and Mark Foley says the same thing as well. You do have to wonder that you can't go forever, and there's always a trade. If you wait until the latest possible moment, you can put a little bit less fuel in potentially, or you can end the risk of ending up in lap traffic. But It's always a question of how open that pit window is. Back up front, Derek Dirksen has not been caught despite the illusion. Kevin Jokel is just battling with a little bit of lap traffic. He's found a friend who's made a pit stop. I believe that's Jeff Williams behind. Doesn't have to worry about him too much. Got by with no trouble and continues to look on his way. And I think you did just see Kevin Jokel there in the very, very far distance. He's 6 seconds ahead. There he is. You just saw him fly by about 2 corners ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, what can you do about this, though? When Jokel has such a gap to make up, I don't see how he can get on terms and try and win this race. It's very, very difficult for him to do that. And in this situation, with the field the way that it is, I think it's very difficult for him to actually get Dirksen to finish third or worse in the next round, if you see what I mean. Looking ahead to that finale that we're going to see at Daytona. I mean, abnormal things can happen around there too, admittedly, but Dirksen and Jokel have shown themselves to be very, very quick indeed, especially Dirksen in this one, which is somewhat of a surprise when you compared their qualifying times.
Here we go, Sackstein finally attempting a move around the outside of David Krutzler. That's a hard place to make a move, but around the outside of turn 12, he's still side-by-side with them into the chicane. It's a little bit tougher to run side-by-side through there, and Mike Sackstein books himself up into P8 with the first overtake we've seen in quite a few minutes. That was aggressive and that was bold.
Yeah, and in the end, didn't get too much of a challenge from Krutzler, who in the end thought, well, I've made the mistake, Sackstein's alongside, I better give this one up now. But there is the danger with that the rest of them will come through. Luckily for Krutzler, it's only Robert Neville behind. I say only, not because it's him, but because there's only one. Neville on the outside, not getting the benefit of the slipstream initially there, just for a couple of moments' time. They fight over it. Will Neville be brave and late on the brakes? Sort of, and needs to be. If he wants the inside of turn 2, I don't think he's quite got it. Neville will have his nose alongside, but it's not enough. Krutzler will chop his nose off and retain 9th place.
Gonna try it, switch it back through the second half of the chicane, but it's not going to happen through turn 3. And they'll continue on there. A couple more takers on pit lane, though. Rex Jarawala and a couple of other takers. That means we're starting to get into those times when we start to think about the hard end of the fuel tank. A pit window can only be so wide. You can only go so many laps before you have to pit. We've seen drivers come in as early as 5 laps ago. A 6-lap pit window is not a very often sight. Adam Holland coming out of pit lane as well. You have to imagine that maybe 1 or 2 more laps are left before fuel's going to run out in these things. And Derek Dirksen and the rest of the drivers behind him will finally be forced to take a little bit of fuel and get back on their way.
Yep, they will. And so it's going to be a waiting game for us now to see who blinks when, what goes on in that respect. But
Eskridge down the hill. I don't know. That looked a little bit dicey, and Derek Dirksen does bring it down pit lane. So that means probably the fuel tanks are all done. Dirksen's down. Jokel's down. John Gibson stays out 1 extra lap, though. He's the lone stayer-outer. You can say that.
Decisions going on the
Robert Neville staying out as well, so 2 drivers able to extend it a little bit further than the rest, but Dirksen comes out fairly safely, 10.7 second stop. Jokel, similar, 10.5. The fuel saving has not mattered much today. It's just a question of actually making that pit stop, getting it slowed down, exiting, and making sure you don't get a penalty like we saw so many times at Zandvoort. Looks like everybody's been clean, and everybody gets to continue racing on for just a few more minutes now. 10 more minutes to go. If you want to make a pass, you've got to do it quick. I think we've got some slight technical difficulties, unfortunately, but we'll keep on trucking here as John Gibson is going to be getting a little bit frustrated behind Jeff Williams. Peaked a nose to the inside, but wasn't actually able to make the move. This is a risk, staying out this late, because you do have the risk of you have the risk of running into lap traffic. Let's say that much, because Jeff Williams is riding around on track on his own. He's got another lap car in front of him. Everybody who pitted is about 30 seconds behind this now. They're not going to run into that lap traffic, and I think that's exactly why you saw race leader Kevin Jokel and Derek Dirksen come in as they knew they were about to run into Jeff Williams and a few others. Robert Neville was able to stay out as well. He isn't quite so unlucky, though. He hasn't run into any lap traffic, and he'll be back into pit lane this time, I imagine, and looking to see where he cycles in the top 10. John Gibson down pit lane. Robert Neville takes a hard right and does the same. I think you're going to see Christopher Costas do that as well. His drive forward has been fairly good, but he'll fall down a little bit more. Robert Neville there, slowing down very, very much for that pit commitment cone. You do have to make sure not to get a speeding penalty there. And he was very, very careful, getting that car very, very slowed down. Now, this is not going to be about the blend for the win. This is going to be about the blend for the podium for John Gibson. The clock ticks up. 10 seconds, 11 seconds now. Where is he going to come out in relation to Steve Komatz and Kenneth Eskridge and James Martin and a few others? It's all about the fight for the third. It looks like it's not going to be that close, though, as Gibson does come out of pit lane a couple of tenths ahead of Komatz. It's close into turn one, though, as Komatz does get around the outside of John Gibson and does take the podium back.
Certainly does. Sorry about that, Joey, leaving you on your own for a couple of moments there, but
I went insane in my own thoughts, Ewan.
Sorry. Yeah, I think my computer's getting old.
Oh, no.
Anyway, podium though for Steve Komatz looking possible now, and not something I would have predicted actually. John Gibson was looking quite comfortable in that situation. I thought he was good value for that third place, but no. Now he's going to have to find his way through on the circuit.
And once again, John Gibson takes a little bit of a hit in his long shot championship battle. He needed to have a very good day today to keep himself alive. And unfortunately, with where he's finishing, or at least where he's running right now, a fourth place finish will give you 17 points. And I think that's going to mathematically eliminate him from championship contention, because both of his rivals, Kevin Jokel and Derek Dirksen, are going to score 4 and 8 points more than him, respectively. And yeah, that's going to be John Gibson's championship battle over, unfortunately. But still, a good run for him this season, and he'll be fighting for third, I think, at the end of the day. But Kenneth Eskridge now is in a very lonely place. Gibson's run away from him. Komatz has run away from him. The battle for fifth, though, is going to rage on until the end of this race, and that train is back together, and Martin and Foley, they're not done.
Well, it may rage on, but I think Eskridge is looking good for this position as well. I think the diminished ambition now of a fourth position finish might actually benefit him in some ways, because he's no longer hung up on trying to overtake them. Instead, his only job now is to defend from those behind, and that may have already had an effect here. He's already nearly a second ahead of those behind, as David Crutzler behind goes into the pit lane again.
Oh dear, Crutzler was having an excellent day in the top 10, and I think he's come afoul of a penalty. He's been forced to serve a drive-through, and that is bad luck for David Crutzler. I believe he got into the back of the 599 car coming onto pit lane. That was Mike Sackstein, rather. And bad luck for him. Well, not bad luck. It was his own fault. Did get a penalty, but at the same time, that takes him out of the top 10 and ends his very, very promising day and drops him down the order. Eskridge is running away a little bit, though. He's had an excellent lap. Martin and Foley far closer, a little bit further back now. These are those final moments, Ewan, those final laps when you do have to kind of think about doing something desperate. If nothing else has worked in the previous 35 minutes of racing, what else can you do? Where have you not attempted an overtake yet? And how aggressive can you get? Those are all the questions on Mark Foley's mind right now.
I think earlier on we were seeing a little bit of the effect that there was, closer to 35 minutes to go than there was in 35 minutes gone. But now we're in that situation where there are only 5 minutes left. Earlier there was a lack of overtaking, partly I think because of a lack of wanting to go through. In terms of lack of wanting to risk things, really, what I mean by that. Instead now, they've got to risk things if they want a result, so that they've kind of been forced into something, going to be forced into something here pretty shortly, with less than 5 minutes to go now. I think Mark Foley is the one most looking like he's going to make a move here, if I'm honest.
Drew Buccine for one of the penultimate times here, about 4 laps to go at the line. A little bit too far back for a move, I think, this time. Gibson a little bit too far back to make a move on Komatz as well, but he has done a good job of keeping this close, and he was ahead of him on pace legitimately before that pit cycle. He got jumped in the pits, didn't get jumped on track. That might give him a little bit of confidence that he might be able to make this move. On that previous lap, though, the comparison does not look good for Komatz, or does not look good for Gibson, unfortunately. A little bit faster in Sector 1, a little bit slower in the second 2 sectors. And now the 27 car could potentially play a role here. The lapped Porsche of James Legault could potentially be the thing that decides this battle for third.
That could be. Don't want to see a lap car fully settling a battle on its own, but may well just do that without even doing anything wrong, of course. Not a particularly ideal place to catch a lap car either. Through the Arabiatas now, through number 2. This is turn 10. And Steve Komatz here is going to have to head down the inside pretty quickly, but no, doesn't on the next braking zone. That's Scarperia before Pelagio, the left-hander. And now look at John Gibson, he's right there. Oof. Oh, Komatz moves one way, the lap car moves the same. And through will go John Gibson.
And Komatz is going to be absolutely irate on that. The door absolutely shut for him, blocked on the left side of the road. And Gibson says, thank you very much, I'll take that. But you have to imagine the stewards might be looking at that with James Legault trying to get out of the way, and I think very much putting himself in the way. Now Komatz has a little bit more aggression in him. I think he especially wants to make this move back. It's not a good enough exit out of the final corner, I think, to make it happen into turn 1. But add a little bit of aggression to Steve Komatz's style for these final 2 laps, and you might see a triumphant dive the second he gets the opportunity to take that back.
Well, will he get the opportunity, though? Because I think John Gibson is quicker than Komatz, although he's already been forcing himself into a defence. If that happens a few more times, then Komatz is going to be right there to give it another go. But it's hard to know where to call that one, really, isn't it, in terms of whether the lap car was at fault or not. I mean, we say it all the time, though. Lap cars are always told to stay on the racing line, be predictable above anything else. And unfortunately, I don't think you can say that about Legault on that occasion. He moved to the left-hand side just as Komatz was doing the same. And that forced him to lift off, forced him to get on the brakes even to try and avoid contact. And in the end, it's handed that third position over in a pretty convincing way, because John Gibson's already pulled to 2.5 seconds.
And unfortunately, you saw out of turn 3 a couple of corners ago. It was a terrible exit from Komatz, hopped over one of the curbs and just couldn't get the throttle down. And that may be that battle resolved, as it'll be 1 lap to go at the line, most likely, depending on when Derek Dirksen crosses the line. It might be a race against the clock. Either way, there's not much time if you want to make a move. Here is Derek Dirksen, the dominant leader of the day, has not been touched since lap 1. And it looks like as he approaches the final corner, it will be the white flag one more time around for Derek Dirksen. And it's essentially going to be a victory lap, Ewan, because he's got nobody anywhere near him. Jokel 4.5 seconds back. Dirksen can cruise en route to his 4th win of the season.
Certainly can, and that will be a wonderful feeling, having already confirmed the fact that he will win more than half of the races this season, and we've already got 1 to go after this one. So 2/3 won by him so far, if he gets to the end of this next minute in the lead, and he will put himself in a strong championship situation, because he and Jokel have been the class of the field so far this season. Even losing to Jokel will give him the title next week, if it's by just the 1 position, and the top 2 would secure that.
A little bit more lap traffic trouble potentially, as the damaged number 29 car of Kevin Haman is slightly in the way. Does a better job of getting out of the way, though, through turn 2, and opens the door for James Martin to come through. Unfortunately, doesn't quite open the door for Mark Foley to come through, but I don't think you can blame the lap car on that. Just the unfortunate realities of how this track works. You're on the inside one corner, you're instantly on the outside the next. It's all about rhythm, and adding an extra chicane with a damaged lap car unfortunately breaks up that rhythm. You mentioned, though, Ewan, this is going to be more than half of the wins in the season for Derek Dirksen. 4 out of 6 so far. Could potentially be as high as 5 out of 7 if he wins Daytona next week, but it will be a 7-point championship margin coming into the championship finale. And as you mentioned a little bit earlier, that means that Kevin Jokel needs to win the race, and he needs to hope that Dirksen has a Zandvoort-style performance and finishes a little bit lower than he's used to.
Yeah, this is lower than 2nd position at the very least. But what a deserving and fantastic drive from Derek Dirksen, who didn't have the speed of Jokel in qualifying. Well, he certainly had that and more in this race.
He's going to have a day like this at Daytona. He might put a second hand of the championship for good, but today he certainly put one hand in the championship. Derek Dirksen wins at Mugello, and keeps his championship lead and makes it even bigger coming into the championship finale at Daytona. Kevin Jokel finishes second, keeps his championship hopes alive, but they are a little bit extended from what he would have liked. He needs to win next week in dominant fashion and hope that Derek Dirksen has a very not Derek Dirksen week, unlike this week. John Gibson rounds off the podium, getting that spot back late in the race. Steve Komat's probably going to be pretty unhappy falling off the podium in the dying moments. Curtis Krumel, got to give him a shout out, ends up in the top 10 at the end of it all, a very big mover at the end of the day. I'm not sure if he's the biggest mover. I can't tell you those numbers exactly, but excellent day by Curtis to quietly move his way into the top 10.
Yeah, really good, and on a circuit that's not the easiest to overtake on either. As I said earlier, I was encouraged by last night, but it was a little bit more difficult today.
And Upper Canada cheers once again. Derek Dirksen victorious at Mugello ahead of the Northeast Kevin Jokel and the Rally Sport region. Ann Arbor, Michigan's John Gibson. Komats and Eskridge rounded out the top 5, and Martin, Foley, Saxty, Neville, and Krumel, they all had some fantastic battles of their own to bring us down to the end of the top 10. Just outside of the top 10 was another big mover. Charlie Ferrer had a solid day, drove his way up through the field, and then an alternate pit strategy for Andrew Long brought him up to P12. Rex Jarawala ran into some early trouble, but it's been a comeback day for so many drivers. After a spin on lap 1, he still managed to drive forward and still managed to finish 13th in almost the top third of the field. Hall, Bluen, Christopher Costas, Gill, Krutzler, Lacombe, and Casion rounded out the top 20. Krutzler would have been a little bit further forward, got himself a penalty though for an incident coming into the pits. Joseph Evers and Adam Holland brought us down to the end of the top 22, then Yerxa, Elsom, Boccieri, De Silva, Nell, Williams, and Gardner rounded out the lead lap finishers at the end of it all. It was one lap down, unfortunately, for James Lego and Kevin Hallan and Randy Lervold, and then we get into the used car, and Ankerberg Sona for that matter, and then we get into the used car lot of cars with heavy damage. Unfortunately, Gil Estupinan and Jason Finch, promising days for both of them, ended for assorted reasons for both of them. Technical for Gil Estupinan, and I believe an early incident for Jason Finch. But 35 cars, 33 of them still finishing at Mugello. Yet another clean day for Porsche Club of America Sim Racing, and yet another championship penultimate round that leaves a championship to be decided at Daytona in a couple of weeks' time. We do have to wait a little bit for that, though, because we're not done with our Mugello action. There's still 2 more Porsche Club of America Sim Racing series that need to take this place on, the Club Series and the Pro Series, coming up over the next couple days and weeks. But we'll see you for both of those in the very near future. Until then, I've been Joey Tebben. Ewan O'Leary's been Ewan O'Leary. Our producer has been Ramiro Augustine Cisneros. And until we see you next time, so long.